So what I want to do today is I want to speak about the Parah Duma. I want to speak about Parshas Parah. This week of learning has been sponsored, and for those that saw, we have this new initiative that we're sponsoring a week of learning. So I want to thank those who have sponsored. Actually, two of the sponsors are on the call tonight. Paul and Chavi Jacobs to commemorate the yahrzeit of Chavi's father, Yom Tov Lipman ben Meshulam Faivish Zal, the Neshama Shavin Aliyah. Henry and Julia Kashitsky and commemorate the yahrzeit of Julia's mother, Simcha Bas Yehuda Zal, Neshama Shavin Aliyah. And Julia should have a refuah shalema. Baruch Hashem, hear that she's doing better. She should continue to have a refuah shalema. Rachel Deanna, Chaviva, and Zev Deanna, and Edna Moshe Malevsky and families in honor of the second yahrzeit on the 19th of Adar of their father and grandfather, Mr. Joel Deanna, Yoel Emmanuel Ben David Zal, the Neshama should have an aliyah. Esther and George Rothenstein to commemorate the yahrzeit of Esther's father, Yisrael Ben Meir Herzl, on the 18th of Adar, the Neshama should have an aliyah. Mrs. Roberta Tobias, Susan, and Ernie Greenwald to commemorate the yahrzeit of their husband and father, Paul Tobias, Pesach Ben Gershon Halevi Zal, the Neshama should have an aliyah. I think Clanton Park Synagogue is on, Refuah Shalema, to Bobby Silverstein and family. Mirz Hashem, the tzchus of the learning should be Refuah Shalema for you and should be an Eloi Nishmas for everyone. So I want to talk about the Parah Duma. Again, hopefully everybody has a source sheet. Hopefully we'll be able to rally up the troops and get them back. But it's good to have everybody here tonight. So let's start on the source sheet. Again, if you don't have it, I just put it into the chat, and I will do it again a few times just to make sure everybody has it. Just click on it. You should be able to get it. We'll start with the Medrash Tanchuma in Parshas Chukas, Siman Ches. We're not going to discuss whether Parah Duma is D'oraisa or not, but there's a whole discussion about that. But I want to speak about the Medrash Tanchuma. I want to tie it into a little bit of what I spoke about in my Navi Shir this week for the women, because it fits in with tonight's Shir, and then we'll have some drush as well. So the Medrash Tanchuma tells us in source number 1, Amar Rabbi Ebo, Mashal Amah Davar Domeh. What can this be compared to? Leben Shifcha Shetanav Paltrin Shel Melech. So it's compared to a mage child who once dirtied the royal palace. Amar HaMelech, so the mage child made a mess. So what does the king say? Tavo imo tikaneach hasatzoa. The mother should come and should clean up the filth. I always forget to thank the people who are showing themselves. It's always good to see faces. The people that aren't showing themselves, I'm not sure what you're doing, that you can't show yourself, but we miss seeing your face. If you're doing anything but being in the bathroom, which you shouldn't be learning anyway, then you shouldn't be embarrassed. We're happy to see you. So Kadosh Baruch Hu also says that just like the Melech tells the mother, come clean up after you see, Yossi Salmon's on the treadmill. That's the way it should be. Yossi Salmon's on the treadmill and he's listening. The truth is, Yossi, if I could give the shear on the treadmill and the people wouldn't bother me, I would actually give the shear on the treadmill because I also am going to go on the treadmill after we finish. It's elliptical, it looks like. But, I can't actually give the shear on the elliptical, even though if I could, I definitely would. See, aren't you proud of him, Wayne? You picked a good son-in-law. Look at this guy. He's learning. This is Torah Umada at its finest. This is YU at its finest. Learning, and he's watching television. He's watching the sports game at the same time. Listen to this. He's doing all these things. Okay, so Kachamar Kadosh Baruch Hu Tavo Paru Techaper Amaseh Egel. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, just like the Melech tells the mother, the Shifcha, come clean up after your son. So Kadosh Baruch Hu tells the Parah, come clean up after your child, the Egel. That's what Kadosh Baruch Hu says. Your son made a mess. The Egel made a mess. Come clean up. Now there's a whole discussion, which we're not going to discuss tonight, is how exactly could the Parah Duma come along and be mechaper? How could he give an atonement for the Egel Hazav if we know that the Torah was created before the world was created? We know the Jewish people got the Torah. We know that the idea of a Parah Duma existed before the Jewish people even sinned. And you get into a whole philosophical and ashkafic discussion. Well, does that mean that the Jewish people were destined to sin? Because if you had something to clean up before the sin, so then in essence you're telling me, well, the Parah Duma was here and the commandment of God to have a Parah Duma was here before the Jewish people even sinned. So God knew that they were going to sin. So did they really have free choice, etc.? That's a whole other shir and a whole other discussion. But either way, however you learn it, and it's very easy to learn because at the end of the day, it's a chok, as we'll see. So you can still say that it was commanded even though the Egel Hazav didn't yet happen. It doesn't necessarily mean it was commanded because the Egel was going to happen. But at the end of the day, once the Egel happens, so the Parah Duma, which had been commanded as a chok, can come and can clean up the mess of the Egel Hazav. But again, it's just like the mother cleaning up after the child. The Parah Duma somehow atones, the Parah Aduma somehow goes ahead and is the antidote for the sin of the Egel Azav. And that's what I want to explore a little bit. I want to explore how the Parah Aduma is the antidote, how it cleans up for the sin of the golden calf. It was a fascinating idea, and it starts with the pasuk in Sefer Devarim in Perek Daled, pasuk Daled. Ve'atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem chayim kulchem hayom. Again, source number 2. If you have the sources, hopefully everybody has it by now. You can follow along inside, but you don't have to. Ve'atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem chayim kulchem hayom. When you cling, when you attach to God, chayim kulchem hayom, you'll have life. The Torah's definition of life is attaching to God. If you attach to God, you're living. If you're not attached to God, you're dead. If you're attached to God, you're living. If you're not attached to God, you're not alive. And that's what it says also in Devarim Lamed Pasuk Chaf. Li'ahavas Hashem Elokecha, to love God, lishma b'kolo u'ledafka bo. You have to attach to Him. Why? Ki hu chayecha ve'orech yamecha. You want life, u'ledafka bo. You attach to God. You want long life, not only in this world but in the next world. U'ledafka bo. Ve'atem adveikim. You attach to God. The Torah defines life as an attachment to God. And that's why, if you ever wondered, the fascinating idea in the Gemara in Brachos, which is based on the pasuk in Koheles, in source number 4, the pasuk tells us in Koheles, Ki hachayim yodim sheyamusu. The people that are alive know that they're eventually going to die. V'hamesim einam yodim uma. Once you die, you don't know what's happening. It's like you're in a deep sleep. Ve'ein od lahem sachar ki nishkach zichram. They no longer have schar, reward, because they forgot their memory. What does it mean that the alive people know they're going to die? Isn't that obvious? Says the Gemara in Meseches Brachos in source number 5, Ki achayim yodim sheyamusu, elu tzadikim shebemisasa nikru chayim. The alive know that they're going to die. These are the tzaddikim who, when they die, are still alive. V'hamesim einam yodim uma, and the dead don't know anything. Elu rishayim shebechayei kriyim mesim. These are the rishayim who, while they're alive, are called dead. And this is the exact idea. The righteous are considered to be alive even after their physical demise. Why? Because at the end of the day, life is not about being alive or being dead. Life is about being attached to God. And if you're attached to God in this world, then you're alive. If you're attached to God in this world, and then you're attached to God by definition with Olam Haba in the next world, then you're still alive. And if you're in this world and you're not attached to God, then you're dead even before you're actually dead and not in the next world. So attached to God is alive, not attached to God is dead, whether it's in this world or the next world. And that's why tzaddikim are considered to be alive even when they're no longer in this world, and Rishayim are considered to be dead even when they're in this world. It's a fascinating idea, because if you have a life that's disconnected from Hashem, disconnected from its source, it's devoid of its essence, it's devoid of its meaning, it's devoid of life. And as we'll see, this will explain the connection with the Parah Aduma, the red heifer, which is the antidote to the impurity that's caused by death, that's caused by the sin of the golden calf. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But let's go back to the very beginning of the Torah. Let's go back to Adam Arishon. And I'll just put it in one more time for those that may not have gotten it. Just sent it out again if you don't have the sources. So let's go back to the beginning of time. Adam Arishon is created. And on the day that Adam Arishon is created, we know he also sins. But before he sins, Adam Arishon realizes that a connection to Hashem, that attachment to God, that a commitment to God is the essence of life. Where do we see this? So if you learn the Zohar, for those that learn Zohar that are 40 or over, the Zohar says in source number 6, Ela b'shaita de Adam, talking about Adam Arishon, kam al ragloi, when he got up on his feet, chamile beryon kulu udechilu mikamei. All of the other creatures, all the animals, it was only Adam and animals, came to him, and they followed him. It wasn't like today when we're terrified of bears and lions, like they all followed Adam Arishon. And they went after him like servants go after a king. Through Amar Lon, and he said to them, Ana v'ason ba'u nishtachavem nichra'a. Our job in this world is to get attached to God. We need to go ahead and bow down to God. That's our job. Adam Arishon acknowledges that a connection, that an attachment, that a commitment to God That is the essence of life, and that's when you have life. Va'azla kulu abasre, and they all followed him. Kevan dechazu de adam sagid lahai asar vizdade be kule imshechu abasre v'kari musa lechol alma. And when they sinned on that very day, and there was a breach in the attachment between Hashem and Adam Arishon, between the creature and the creator, when he ate from the tree of knowledge, the phenomenon of death became part of the human experience. And it makes a lot of sense. Why was death the punishment? Because if life is an attachment to God, then by definition, when you detach yourself from God by not listening to God's commandments, it's not necessarily a punishment, death. I mean, it is, but death is the definition of being detached from God. So if you're detached from HaKadosh Baruch Hu because you did an Aveira, because you did something you shouldn't have done and you detached yourself, so that's when death can come into the picture. Because if you're not detached from Hashem, then death can't come into the picture. Then you're a tzaddik, and even while you're alive, and even while you're dead, you're alive. But once Adam detached from Hashem and sinned, so now the concept of death can come into this world. And we know that, fortunately or unfortunately, 26 generations later, death was gone again. Because we're told that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu went up on Har Sinai, and when Moshe Rabbeinu went up on Har Sinai, it restored the attachment, the connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and this world, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Adam Arishon, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people, the intimate bond between God and creation. And that's why at the time, death was gone again. Everybody was at Har Sinai. Nobody was ill. Everybody was going to live forever. This is actually a famous, the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a famous essay, Basi Ligani. So this is the idea in Shir Hashirim Rabbah. There's a famous medrash in source number 7 that says, Basi Ligani. I came to my garden. Amar Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Menachem, Chasnei de Rabbi Lazar bar Avuna b'shem Rabbi Shimon bar Yosna. And again, you're allowed to talk if you want. Just unmute yourself. Basi Ligan. It doesn't say I came to the garden. In Ksiv Khan. Ela Ligani. I came to my garden. Lignunai. Limakom shehaya ikari mitchila. God says, I came to my garden. I returned to the garden that I was in before. The ikar shchina lo betachtonim haisa. The ikar shchina at that time was not in the tachtonim. It says, Vayishmeu es kol Hashem Elokim misalech bagan. Hashem was in the gan. He was there. He was attached. He was in this world. It was like the Mishkan. He was here all the time until Adam Arishon sinned. Basi Legani, when he gave the Torah, he returned to this world. The attachment, the intimate attachment that Adam Arishon had with Hashem before the sin returned. Adam Arishon was the same connection and attachment to Hashem that the Jewish people had at Har Sinai. Chat Adam Arishon, or Chet Adam Arishon, he sinned. V'nistalka Ashchina l'Rekia Arishon. This is an interesting idea. As soon as Adam sinned, so it went up to Adam, it went up to the Rekia Arishon. What is Erwin going to say? They all died when they heard the voice at the exact moment of attachment. Yeah, but then seemingly they died and then they came back to life, and then maybe they were going to die again.
But at the
ultimate attachment of Anoch Hashem Elokecha, when they couldn't handle it, so they all died. But they were all
that would be the pinnacle of attachment, which would mean the highlight of life.
Right, but it's tzaddik, but we said it's tzaddik in death is really still alive. So they may not have been physically alive. They may have been so spiritual that they didn't have to be physically alive when they were attached to Hashem on such a high level. So then they can spiritually be alive, even though physically they can't live in this world. They were such a high level, they couldn't even physically live in this world. So we say over here that after Adam Rishon sinned, so the Shechina went up one level. Cain sinned, Nistalka l'Rekia Sheni. Enosh sins, Nistalka l'Rekia Shlishi. Dor HaMabul, Noach, it goes up to the 4th heavens. Dor HaMigdal, Migdal Bavel, the 2nd column, it goes up to the 5th heaven. So it's sort of retreating. The Shechina is going higher and higher. The Anshe Sodom, it goes up to the 6th. The Mitzrim at the times of Abraham, it goes up to the 7th. Kenegdan Amdu Shivat Tzadikim Varidul Aretz. And then we had to bring the Shechina back. So Abraham brings it from 7 to 6. Yitzchak brings it from 6 to 5. Yaakov brings it from 5 to 4. Levi brings it from 4 to 3. Kahas brings it from 3 to 2. Amram brings it from 2 to 1. Now it's in the upper heavens. Moshe Rabbeinu brings it la'aretz. When the Jewish people get the Torah, this connection, this flow, this attachment between the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is back. And that's why that it was at that very moment, or we can say it was because at that very moment that the Jewish people went ahead and unequivocally committed themselves to the fulfillment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that attachment was reattached like it was in the times of Adam. I don't have to bring you the sources, but I brought you in 8, 9, and 10. That's what the Jewish people did at Har Sinai. Vayanu kol ha'am yachdav, vayamru kol hader asher diber Hashem naseh. Vayavo Moshe vayzaber lehem es kol divrei Hashem, vayomru kol asher diber Hashem naseh. Vayikach zeris vaykrav eznehem, vayomu kol asher diber Hashem naseh v'nishma. They're willing to attach, and when they're willing to attach, so then the attachment is there. And it restores that connection of Jewish people, of really all people, to life, and it takes them away from death. And that's what the Gemara, that's really what the Medrash says in source number 12, based on the pasuk in source number 11. The luchos were the masim of God. They were a creation of God. The writing on the luchtav were michtav elokim hu, charus al haluchos. And the whole discussion, what does it mean that the writing was charus al haluchos? So the Gemara, so the Medrash Rabbah says in source number 12 that there's a machlokes. What's charus? Rabbi Yehuda Omer al tikre charus el acherus min galios. Again, once there was the writing of the luchos, the Torah, there was no more galios. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, for our purposes, cherus mimalach hamaves. Rabbi Seinu Omer cherus min hayisurim, they're nowhere yisurim. But for our purposes, the second answer that says Rabbi Nechemia, they were free from the malach hamaves. Once they committed Nasav and Ishma, once they were attached to God, cherus mimalach hamaves, they went back to the times of Adam Arishon, and they weren't going to die. Unfortunately, this time as well, the flow from heaven to earth, the connection, the attachment between Hashem and the Jewish people, between Hashem and the creation and his creations, unfortunately was very short-lived, because 40 days after the Jewish people stood at Sinai, they transgressed the source number 13, Lo yelecha Elohim acherim al panai, should not have any other gods, and they worshipped the sin of the golden calf. And we know that because of that, once again, death, which had been taken away when they recommitted themselves now, the concept of death was reintroduced. As the Zohar tells us in source number 14, Kevan dechatu be'egel, isaber minai kol inon darginu nahorini layin, all of the high levels that they had connected to Hashem with were taken away. V'garmu musa l'chol alma, and again, death was reintroduced into this world. So we see again that when there's an attachment to Hashem, pre-chet of Adam Arishon, there's no death, because by definition, death is a detachment from Hashem. When there's a connection to Hashem, pre the Egel Hazav, when they got the Torah and they said Nasav and Ishma, there's no death. And as soon as they sin again, just like by Adam Arishon, death comes back to this world. But we still have to understand how exactly is the Parah Aduma, which we know just physically in this world, or we should say spiritually, purifies from death, or purifies from the tumah of death. How exactly is that going to fix the chet of the Egel Hazav? So we know that death, as we see in source number 15, and as we know, death is what we call avi avos hatumah, as Rashi says, actually not brought anywhere in the Gemara and the Mishnayos. It's not called avi avos hatumah. Rashi calls it avi avos hatumah. It's the father of all fathers of impurity. And based on what we're saying, it makes perfect sense. Because if death, by definition, is a symptom, if it comes from a detachment from God, so then I understand why death is the most impure, the father of all fathers of impurity, because death symbolizes detachment from Hashem. Detachment from Hashem is the worst thing you could have in this world, and therefore it's going to be the highest level of impurity that you can have in this world. And we know that there are several forms of ritual impurity, but the most severe one is the tumah that's generated by a dead body, because while other forms of impurity we know come from touching or from moving the object that's not pure, by death, it's merely tumas oel, a canopy. If even for a second you're under the roof, the same roof as a dead body, you're ritually impure until when? Until the ashes of the Parah Aduma are sprinkled on you. And that's the idea in source number 16, Zos HaTorah Adam Ki Amus Ba'oel, Kol Habal O V'Chol Asher Ba'oel, Yitma Shivas Yamim. That's also the idea. This is the famous idea Adam ki yamos ba'oel, you have to kill yourself in the Oel of Torah. If you want to be successful, you have to literally kill yourself in the Oel of Torah. So that is the idea of death. So how exactly is the Parah Aduma the antidote to this all? So in order to purify yourself when you've been contaminated with death, so the Torah tells us that you take this Parah Aduma, you take this red heifer, you have to slaughter it, you have to burn it. The ashes are mixed with mayim chayim, living water from a spring issuing from the earth. And then the waters of purification are sprinkled on the person who's contaminated, who's ritually impure, on the third and seventh day of a 7-day purification period. Because if death is the symptom, if death is what comes from a disconnect from Hashem, then mitzvos, divine commandments, is how you go about and you reconnect to Hashem. If death comes from disconnecting from Hashem, then the way to reconnect to Hashem is by doing mitzvos. And if there's going to be one mitzvah that you're going to choose to say that through that mitzvah, or through any mitzvah, but specifically through that mitzvah, I'm going to reconnect with Hashem, then it's going to be a chok. It's going to be a mitzvah that I don't understand. Because if I do a mitzvah that I understand, yes, I'm connecting to Hashem because Hashem is telling me, but if I do a mitzvah of do not kill, if I do the mitzvah of honoring my parents, then that's partly, or you could even say mainly, based on my own reasoning. I could argue that I'm not doing it because God commanded me to do so. I'm doing it because morally I shouldn't be killing people. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. I owe my parents, they raised me. But if I do a chok, if I do something like Parah Aduma, which makes absolutely no sense, then the only reason that I'm doing it is because Hashem said so. But if the only reason I'm doing something is because Hashem said so, what greater way to reattach myself to Hashem than to do a chok? So if a sin, and specifically the sin of the Egel Hazav, which was a terrible sin of detaching from God, so if you want to rectify the detaching from God, then the ultimate extreme, again, I would say that Avodah Zarah and Parah Aduma, Avodah Zarah and Egel Hazav is the one extreme of detaching from God, while the other extreme of reattaching to God would be the Parah Aduma, would be a chok, would be something that we're doing for no other reason than because God commanded us, that Hashem commanded us, because we have no idea what the thing is all about. And we know that there's nothing that we understand about the Parah Aduma, and that it's a chok, the supra-rational divine decree. As Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, said in source number 17, Kol ze nisisi b'chachma, amarti ech kama v'yirechoka mimeni. All these laws I comprehend, but the chapter of the Parah Aduma, I've examined it, I've questioned it, I've delved into it. I thought that I was wise, but it eludes me. And the Medrash itself says...
But according to Rav Eva, we do have a reason, right? I mean, that Rashi brings that second thing. That saying we do have a reason why Parah Aduma. And he brings the marshal. It's the mother to be the chaper on the egel. So it's not completely a chayim.
Right, but again, you're right, Chaim, but like I mentioned before, and that's what I alluded to before, it's sort of like an answer after the fact, because the fact that it was given before they even sinned shows that the fact that it's even working is only because it's a chok. It doesn't even make sense that it could clean up for the mother when it was commanded, when the Torah was given and Bereshis came and the Torah was already in existence, and they're going to say, well, you have this chok of Parah Aduma that's going to clean up for an egel that's going to happen later. After the fact, since the whole thing is a chok, we can go in and we can say, okay, let's dot and let's cross and let's make the connection. But at the end of the day, a chok is a chok.
But why can't you say that the mitzvah of Parah Aduma would have been in existence no matter what, whether the egel would have happened or not? It's just if it wouldn't have happened, it would have been for a different reason.
Right, again, so I think that's getting to what Chaim is saying. I think that's the point, is that once we have the mitzvah of Parah Aduma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, I was going to give it to you anyway, now that you messed up, I want you to understand that it's exactly this type of mitzvah, the Parah Aduma, that you can use, even though, again, quote unquote, it's a chok, the fact that it's a chok is the very reason and the very mitzvah that you can use to reconnect to me. I think that's the idea.
And that reason is also a little strange, because it wasn't the egel really that did the avera, it was Bnei Yisrael that did the avera. So the mother that's being mechaper on the kid, I mean, the egel itself was created by Bnei Yisrael. The Bnei Yisrael did the avera, not the egel.
Right. So again, I'm sort of pulling it out of the mashal, and I'm saying that this is all for Bnei Yisrael. The fact that Bnei Yisrael is going to use a chok to reconnect to Hashem, it's just the mashal of the mother. Yes, it's not exactly the connection of the mother to the baby, but it's the fact that Bnei Yisrael is going to use a chok. We're going to reattach ourselves totally to Hashem by saying, whatever you say we'll do, nasev and ishma. Not exactly, but nasev and ishma, whatever you say we'll do. And that's how we reattach ourselves to Hashem. The Medrash, in fact, relates that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught this law to Moshe Rabbeinu, so he was blown away as well. Amar Lefanav, in source number 18, Ribono Shalom, v'chitarahi, is this purification? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe, chuka hi ugzera gazarti vein bria yechola lamod al gzerasi. It's a gzera, and nobody can understand it. D'chsiv, zos, chukas, haTorah. And yet we know, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, we know that it says specifically zos, chukas, haTorah in source number 19. This is the chok of the Torah. You should take a Parah Duma, which again means that this is the ultimate chok, not just of Tum and Tara. This is the chok of the Torah because in essence, the purpose of every mitzvah at the end of the day is to attach to Hashem. And this, out of all of the mitzvahs at the end of the day, is the ultimate way to attach to Hashem, because if you do something that has no other reason but because Hashem said so, that's the ultimate way that we can go ahead and connect to Hashem. And it's interesting because if you look at the Rambam in source number 20, he seems to allude to this. He seems to allude to the fact that if death is from disconnect to Hashem, then chok is the ultimate way to connect to Hashem. This is in Me'ilah. This is the end of Hilchos Me'ilah. In source number 20, it's the very last halacha in Hilchos Me'ilah. For those that never learned Hilchos Me'ilah before, now you've learned it and you've finished it as well. V'achukim hein ha-mitzvos she'ein tam an yadua. We know that chukim are the mitzvos that we don't understand. Amru chakamim, chukim chakti lecha ve'ein lecha reshut sahara lecha. Bahen, I gave you chukim and you can't start figuring them out. V'yitzro shel adam nokva bahen. Our Yetzer says, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? Basar v'chalav. What's the big deal? What are you doing? I don't understand. Ve'umas olam hashivin alein kigon iser basar chazu. You can't eat pig. That's ridiculous. Ubasar b'chalav. That's ridiculous. You're going to break the neck of the egla rufa. You're going to have a Parah Duma. You're going to Sarah Mishalech. You're going to send away a Sa'ir, and you're going to go ahead and throw him off of a cliff on Yom Kippur. They were driving David HaMelech nuts, the heretics and the non-Jews. They were telling him this makes absolutely no sense. As much as they kept giving him our time that we don't understand, it makes no sense. That would make him get even closer to Torah. Because if I'm doing it and you keep reminding me that it makes no sense and I do it anyway, that's the ultimate way to attach to Hashem. Shenamar tiflo alai sheker zaydim, ani b'cholei vatzor pikudecha. Nemar sham be'inyan kol mitzvosecha emuna sheker ritfuni azreini. B'chol hakorbanos kula miklal hachukim hein. Korbanos themselves are all chukim. They make no sense. Amu chachamim shebishvil avodas hakorbanos ha'olam omeid. The korbanos, which are chukim at the end of the day, to kill an animal, you can have all the rationale you want. To kill an animal to serve God who doesn't really need it, that's a chok. Because you're attaching to Hashem and you're getting life in this world and life in the next world. First the chok, then the mishpat. You want to live, you do the mitzvos, and specifically you do the chukim, because life is not about physical life. Life is about a connection to Hashem. And if you want a connection to Hashem, says the Rambam, you do the mitzvos. And when you do the mitzvos and you're alive, you're connected to Hashem. And when you do the mitzvos and then you die, you're still connected to Hashem. And when you don't do the mitzvos and you're alive, you're actually dead because you're disconnected from Hashem. And when you don't do the mitzvos and you're dead, you're obviously dead as well. And that's the idea, and that's where we sum it up with the Rambam, that you go ahead. Death is a disconnect from Hashem. Chok is the ultimate way to reconnect. There was a connection with Adam Arishon, between Hashem and Adam Arishon and the people before the sin. When he disconnected from Hashem, death came. There was a connection between Hashem and the Jewish people at Matan Torah, and there was no death. The Jewish people sinned with the Egel Azav, and death was brought again. Comes along the Parah Duma, which purifies us in this world from death. It comes along the Parah Duma on a much deeper level and says, we're not going to get rid of death right now totally. There's still going to be death in this world. But if you want to be alive, then you have to attach to Hashem. And the way to attach to Hashem is to do the mitzvahs. And the ultimate way to attach to Hashem is to do the chukim, the mitzvahs that you don't understand, and the mitzvahs that you specifically do for one reason and one reason only, because Hashem commanded you to do so. Just parenthetically, I want to bring in the law of the red heifer, the law of the Parah Aduma. And again, this is a little bit deeper, but I've gotten the point across. But on deeper level, the law of the Parah Aduma has many contradictory themes, many contradictory ideas. Anybody want to throw it out there, I guess, for a second? Anybody want to tell me some of the contradictory themes, besides for the famous idea that it's Matar the Tmeim and Matami the Tahorim? What are some other contradictory ideas and themes that we find in the Parah Aduma? Don't be shy. Somebody besides for Oren. Anybody? Some contradictory themes. Somebody, don't be shy. What else doesn't seem to make sense? Okay, I'll give you one. So the ashes, we know, remove the most severe of all impurities, and yet those involved in the preparation, the slaughtering, the burning, the collecting of the ashes, they become ritually impure themselves. That's one thing. The heifer itself, the actual par, is completely red. What is red? So if you look at source number 21, look at source number 21, what does it say here? Vayomer Esav el Yaakov, Haliteni namin hadom adom azek yayef anochi. Esav says to Yaakov, give me some of the red stuff. Alkein kara shemo edom. We see that red is a negative connotation in the Torah. Red has a negative connotation in halacha. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch, we know this idea. We talk about tznius sometimes, but it's not just by tznius. This is in Yoreh Deah, in the Siman that talks about the halachas of Ovdei Kochavim. You should be different from the non-Jews in what you wear. Uvishar masav, in the things you do. V'chol ze'ena aser, ela b'davar shenagu bo ha'ovdei kochavim l'shum pritzas. You don't have to do everything different than the non-Jews. If they drive cars, you don't have to not drive a car. If they drink ginger ale, you don't have to not drink ginger ale. Kigon shenagu lielbosh malbushim adumim. But if they do it for pritzas, if they do it for negative reasons, if they do it for immoral reasons, then you go ahead and you have to stay away. So on one hand, we have the idea that it has to be completely red, which has negative connotations. It has to be slaughtered outside of Yerushalayim, as opposed to other karbanos which are slaughtered in the Beis HaMikdash and in the Azara, in the courtyard. On the other hand, even though it's red and it's negative and it's outside of the Beis HaMikdash, it has to be perfect. It can't have a blemish. Asher lo ala le'ol. It never carried anything. It's slaughtered. You have to be able to see the Beis HaMikdash. The blood is sprinkled towards the Kodesh Kadashim. It has to be prepared by a Kohen. According to some, it has to be prepared by the Kohen Gadol, while he's wearing the Begadim Levanim, the white clothing that's reserved for the Yom Kippur, to go into the Kodesh Kadashim. Not only that, when you go ahead and you have the purifying mixture, it's a mixture of ashes, which is fire, and the opposite, water. So you see that there's many parts of this process that seem to have contradictory themes. And the explanation that's given by Chassidus that I saw quoted by, who wrote this? Rabbi Jacobson, says that any mitzvah, or really of life, there's a paradox. And again, this is a little bit disconnected from what we were talking about, not disconnected from God, but disconnected to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. But really, this is the paradox of life, where Hashem wants us to sort of live a little bit of contradictory themes, not necessarily contradictory. He doesn't want us to be contradictory, but to live sort of in like two worlds. He wants us to live in the physical world. He wants us to sanctify the physical world. And at the same time, he wants us to stay away from the physical world. There are parts of the physical world like the Parah Aduma. There's contradictory themes. There's fire, there's water. There's mitar the tmeim and mitami the torim. It purifies some and it makes other people impure. There's the red versus the fact that it's slaughtered towards the Holy of Holies. There's the fire in the water. So too over here in life, there's the physical world, which we're supposed to partake in and elevate. And then there's the physical world that we're supposed to stay totally away from. And that's really maybe the two different types of mitzvos. The 365 lo saseh, stay away. Don't bother. Don't touch. The 248 mitzvahs saseh, take the physical world and elevate it. Take the lemon, the esrog, and elevate it. Take the ram's horn and elevate it. Take the seventh day, Saturday, and elevate it. Stay away from certain things that are harmful, that are bad, killing, non-kosher, shadness, whatever it is, whether it's a chok or a mishpat or it makes sense. And then other things, take the physical world and elevate it. That's the Parah Aduma. That's the symbolism of contradictory themes. That's how we live our lives, is that you have prohibitive acts, you have positive acts, There are certain things. Life is about staying away from parts of the physical world, and at the same time, life is about sanctifying parts of the physical world, and all of whose purpose is to create an attachment to Hashem. Whether you're staying away from something, you're creating an attachment from Hashem, or whether you're elevating something, you're creating attachment to Hashem and providing us with life in this world and in the next world. I'm not going to have time to get into the part that I wanted to talk about with the Navi, but I want to leave you with two things that are not connected to this idea of connection and attachment to Hashem, but two beautiful drashas that I want to give you, two homiletic ideas that I want to give you on the Parah Aduma, and we'll conclude with this. One of them is from the Drash Moshe, from Rav Moshe Feinstein, and one of them is from the Koch Ve'or, which is Rav Yitzchak Blazer. So let's start with Rav Moshe Feinstein in source number 23. Rav Moshe Feinstein says, and these are two beautiful, beautiful ideas. He lived from 1895 to 1986. Rav Moshe Feinstein says, Zos Chukas HaTorah. We alluded to this before. Zos Chukas HaTorah. Why does it say Zos Chukas HaTorah and not Zos Chukas HaTorah? And we said, for our purposes before, we said Zos Chukas HaTorah because the whole essence of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through a chok is the ultimate way to attach yourself to Hashem. But he says, is this Parsha really telling me the entire chukim of the entire Torah? And he says, yes. Because the entire Torah, he says, follows the paradigm of the Parah Aduma process. Both of these pieces concentrate on the idea that it's metame the tehorim and it's matar the tameim, that it purifies the person you're sprinkling on and it makes impure the person who's doing the sprinkling, the person who's doing the burning, the person who's going ahead and collecting the ashes. And listen to what he says. He says that everything we do can be one of two ways. And for us, it needs to be one way, and for others, it needs to be another way. Let's read it inside. It's a fascinating idea. Zos chukas haTorah. Lashon zeh mashma shehu chuka kol haTorah. It doesn't say Zos chukas haTorah mimes, like it says Zos chukas haPesach v'nira. Listen to what he says. Beautiful idea. Shehu lahoro shekol haTorah hu b'derech zeh deParah. Similar to what we were just saying just a second ago, that the Parah has different parts. He's supposed to have one aspect and then a contradictory aspect. Well, it's not exactly contradictory, but it's matar the tameim and matami the Torah. What does that mean? That it has two aspects, that it could purify one person and make another person tamei. With every one character trait that we have, you have to serve God and not to be over and go against God. This is a fascinating idea. You need to act towards yourself in one way and towards other people in the exact opposite way. That's the Parah Aduma. Mitar the Tameim, Mitame the Tahorim. When you act towards other people, you need to act with gaiva. What does that mean? Let's explain. It doesn't mean you need to be haughty. Hainu, sheyizaher ma'od bechavod chavero. Don't be humble for another person. Don't say, I'm going to step into his shoes and be humble. No, when you're pretending to be that other person, when you want to serve that other person, serve him as if he was gaivadik. Do everything you can for him. You should be very careful with the honor of your friend. And you should assume, even though, of course, the friend's not acting like this, you should assume that the friend is haughty and the friend needs everything. You should treat him as if he needs everything. But when you go ahead and you act upon yourself, what do? The exact opposite. You have to act not haughty, you have to act humble. You should be careful for his kavod, for Yenim's kavod. But when it comes to your kavod, you should be an anav. By his kavod, you should have gaiva. You should go out of your way to give him kavod. But by your kavod, you should be an anav. Uvemidas hagaiva shal kavod chaverun makbid kamo bal gaiva. Again, you're not actually a bal gaiva. He's not a bal gaiva, but you should treat him as a bal gaiva who needs the kavod. That's how you should want to treat him, to give him as much kavod as possible. And also bemidas hapizaron litstaka sheyitain meiser v'yoser, in terms of money. So when it's your money, you should give it all away. Don't say, oh, it's okay, I'll give it all away. When it's his money, even a penny, you need to guard very carefully. Your money, give it away. A penny, and even more than a penny, hundreds and thousands of dollars. You care about your own kavod and your own mammon, and on your chaver eno makbid who over chas v'shalom bebeis amidos. V'zehu perish b'shnei yitzarecha. You should serve God b'shnei yitzarecha, with both of your yitzers. Shebechol esu kain. It's a fascinating idea. Everything we do can either be mitar tameim or mitame tahorim. Everything we do, we need to act in opposite ways when we act with ourselves and with others. We need to be very humble and not seek honor. But when it comes to others, we need to give them a lot of kavod. When we have to go ahead and give away all of our money to tzedakah, not all of it, but give away our money to tzedakah, when it comes to other people, we have to be very careful with their money. And if we do the opposite, if we're mitar the tameim and mitami the torim, if we do the opposite, it can lead to terrible consequences. That's Rav Moshe Feinstein's idea. It's a beautiful vort. Finally, Rav Yitzchak Blazer. Rav Yitzchak Blazer, Rav Moshe Feinstein lived until 1986. Rav Yitzchak Blazer lived until 1907. So they actually overlapped for 12 years. Rav Moshe was 12 years old when Rav Yitzchak Blazer died. He says a similar idea, but he says a different idea. He takes it in a different direction. He says it's a mashal for growth in life. What does that mean? He says that you can have two people who from the outside look to be exactly the same, but one of them is growing and one of them is falling. What does that mean? You don't have to go to the eye doctor. You just come to my shir. If you can read it, you know that you see okay. If you can't read it, then you do know you should probably be going to the eye doctor. It's very small. I'm sorry. These pieces, I try to keep the font pretty good. The regular font's not bad, but when you have like a copy of something, it's hard to do it. But I think you need new glasses, Chaim. I never understood, like in yeshiva, I never did that. But like the people who like hold the thing up to them, I don't know. Like I this is not my. I don't know how to do that. Mishahayelo elef. Let's just say somebody had $1,000. Reva Kesev, I think that's what it stands for. V'hatzlachas amada liyamino v'erviach ha'sheyeshu he'alpayim nikra ola. Mishahayelo sach haseres alafim v'ifsid akadei ches alafim nikra yored. You have two people that have $500,000. It's a lot of money. Very nice. There's only one problem. One guy last week had $1,000 to his name. The other guy last week had $1 million to his name. So from the outside, they both have the same exact amount of money. But for somebody who knows that this guy's going in the wrong direction, this guy's going in the right direction. If two of them are financial advisors or two of them are investing in the stock market, so they might both show you that we're watching over $500,000 of money. But if you don't do your research, you don't want to give the money to the guy who just had $1 million and now has $500,000. You want to give the guy who started with $1,000 and now has $500,000 because he's an Ola. Have the same amount of money. So the guy who's going up is very happy. And he's very upset because he's losing all his money. And not only that, in the eyes of the world, the Ola is going to be more accepted. When it comes to the physical world, so a guy who's losing all the money, nobody's going to want to give him any money. Kain Hadavar on the left side, like 6 lines down in source number 24. Kain Hadavar Baruchnius. The same thing when it comes to spirituality. Awesome. Yesh Ola v'yesh Yored. There's a person going up and a person going down. You could have two people who are learning 6 hours a day. You could have two people who are coming to Rabbi Spitz's Thursday night shir. Hopefully nobody here. But you have two people who are coming to the shir. Well, one guy before Corona was going to night seder every night. He was learning 3 hours a day. Now he's down to 1 hour a day. You should still come to the shir. Another guy has never gone to a shir in his life, and now he's committed to an hour every single day or an hour every single week. So who's in a better shape? They're both learning an hour a day, but one guy is on the way up and the other guy is on the way down. A guy who never went to yeshiva and now is learning 2 hours every night, and a guy who's learning in yeshiva and now all of a sudden he's barely learning. So they might be learning the same amount of time, but one guy's going this way and one guy's going that way. Oh, that's fascinating. At his time, it's not so long ago, in 1907, he assumed that you're learning at least 6 hours a day. So the person who's learning 6 hours a day is going up, who wasn't learning at all. And the guy who was learning all day and now he's only learning 6 hours, he's still learning 6 hours a day, he's going down. They're equal. It says, Hashamnu mikol am, boshnu mikol dor. We were sinning mikol am, we're embarrassed mikol dor. Zeu she'elo tshuva, madu hashamnu mikol am. Why are we sinning more than any other nation? Yan boshnu mikol dor. Ki umas ha'olam, compared to us, you can't compare yourself to the non-Jews. Well, they're not learning either. Yes, okay, but they were never learning. So the fact that they're not learning is not okay. That's not a comparison. You who were learning, you're on the way down. They who are never growing, okay, so they're on the way up or they're not on the way at all. Aval Yisrael yordimi madrigasam. The whole door we're going down, unfortunately. Him yevoshim mikol dor vador. And he says, Kopanim nimsa ki mechata zeu remez lisorus harishon shemetiv darko ma'at mekuva merutza mitchile atam lagamre v'misha yishalim b'malos u'erin madrigas etc. V'zeu remesh shal mechatas mitaher temeim u'mitame tahorim hainu what ki zeh hamatzav l'temeim hu mitaher v'l'tahorim mitame mi'achar sheyarad mi medrako mi sheyarad madrigaso. What does it mean? It's that purifies the impure and it makes impure the people who are pure. It purifies the impure. Those are the people who are going up. It purifies those who are on the way up. And the ones who are on the way down, those are the pure people who have now become impure. Another way of learning, again, Ramosha says that when you treat other people, you should treat them in a certain way, much more kavod and much more honor and much more money than you would do for yourself. When you're treating yourself, you're an anav, you're simple, you give a lot of money. When you're treating other people, you give them a lot of kavod and you give them a lot of money. And when it comes again to Rav Yitzchak Blazer, he's saying that don't just be satisfied where you are. If you're growing, then you're doing great. As long as you're being mitahir and you were tameh, you're on the way up, you're doing great. But don't be satisfied if you're really on the way down. And that's why we always said that if you're not growing, it's not either or. It's if you're not growing, you're going down. Don't be satisfied if you're here. If you're here and you were here, you're doing great. Keep going. But if you're here and you were here, then just realize that you're on the way down and not on the way up. And you have to refocus and you have to go on the way up. So that's what we learned tonight. To Derech Drush, we learned the idea of attachment to Hashem, and the idea that death was a detachment from Hashem. We should all be zocheh to be able to do the mitzvos, to be able to do the chukim, to attach ourselves to Kadosh Baruch Hu in a way that all of us should be, as the Gemara says, we should all be tzaddikim shebemisas and nikru chaim. We should all be tzaddikim that forever are living. Yossi, are you done on the treadmill yet? You stopped. Okay, he's pretty good. Okay, have a wonderful night, everybody. Thank you again. A great Shabbos. Looking forward to continuing the shir together with the Geshmak. We'll do some stuff for Pesach, Meretz Hashem, next week. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Go ahead.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.